I just want to talk for a couple of minutes about the scripture and about this season of Lent that we're moving into. And I want to start by noting some of the decor. Karen Cranebetter, who does such amazing stuff, really just incredible things. Karen and I met to look at the season and to explore it. And one of the things that we noticed in this year's season of Lent is that all of the scriptures seem to have conversations in them. And so we have the tomb and other stones over there in balance, but the central pieces, both on the pulpit and then hanging here, we wanted in a kind of abstract way to illustrate, to symbolize conversation and to imagine some of the ways in which we talk together as we look through this season at the various conversations in Scripture, that these might remind us of conversations that we have as well, conversations with God, through prayer, conversations with one another. So I want to talk for just a second about the conversation this morning that Jesus has with the seducer. Interestingly, the Bible usually translates the Greek word diabolos in this passage as the devil. And in fact, the English word devil comes from the word diabolos. But interestingly, that word in Greek doesn't have that sense to it. It's the word that's usually used to describe a seducer, someone who seduces you in terms of kind of sucks you in, kind of person that draws you in perhaps to some place that you don't want to go, to some deal that you don't want to be a part of. And I think that that's such a good descriptor for this entity in this story. Another way that word sometimes gets translated is the accuser. You see, the identity of the person that Jesus has this conversation with doesn't really matter. What's significant about it is that there is an entity there that is trying to challenge Jesus. And Jesus responds so wonderfully. Now, it's an interesting fantasy kind of story. It's the kind of story that we often see in movies and in TV shows, where someone is here, and then suddenly they're there, and then suddenly they're over there. It's a construct that's often used in the Bible to suggest to us that this is not exactly the way the story happened, and that doesn't matter. We're obsessed with things being factually correct. Biblical people weren't. They were obsessed with things being symbolically correct. So the fact that Jesus is in the wilderness and then suddenly he's at the top of the temple and then suddenly he's somewhere else in Jerusalem doesn't matter. What matters is that Jesus shows us in these three questions and responses really important things about who he is and about his ministry. And of course, this story comes in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. This story comes at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. So the first thing is the seducer, the accuser, comes up to Jesus and says, "So, if you're the Son of God," that's kind of like someone comes up to you and says, "So, if you're a nice guy," which immediately seduces you in, right? If you're a nice guy, of course you're going to have to do this. If you're the Son of God, you could turn some of those stones into bread right now. To which Jesus says, in essence, yeah, but no. That would give me bread for now. But as we all know, eating a big meal, we often, we'll eat a big meal and we think, oh, this is going to last me for days, and then 3 hours later, you're having your next meal, because that's just what we do, right? Turning stones into bread might have given Jesus a temporary fix for something. But Jesus is not about temporary fixes, and that's what he wants us to realize. Jesus' ministry is about showing us that God is way more than that. God is not just a magician who, presto, gives you instant things. God is with us for the long haul, for more than just a loaf of bread or a good meal. God is there to guide us, to lead us. Jesus brings God to us in that way. He's not going to play silly games of giving us a nice dinner. So the seducer, the accuser, then thinks, okay, let me try another tactic here. Let's try the testing God thing. Always popular. right? Testing God is when you say things like, God, if I'm really good, you'll give me a new car, right? Has that ever worked for anybody here, by the way? just wondering. Testing God is an odd thing, because I have run into people who will tell you that trying to test God in ways like that is a demonstration of faith, and yet whenever I look at it, to me, testing God seems like a really great way to show that you don't have faith. Testing God is kind of a way of saying, okay, God, I'm not sure I'm going to believe in you. I'd like you to show off a little bit here. I'd like some fireworks. I'd like some flash. I'd like some zip. And that's not what God is about either. God is not about impressing us. Jesus is not going to play some game of going, wow, I can do some incredible magic and illusion and amazing stuff to show you just how cool God is. I can make that grand piano disappear. No. That's not what Jesus is about. David Copperfield could do it, yes. Jesus isn't going to bother. Jesus isn't going to play games that just show us that we're trying to control God and make God be what we want. God is, and we are. And that's all. And so then the last one, the accuser who's not having a very good day here, tries one more trick and says to Jesus, okay, let's just bypass everything. Let's zip from this moment to the end of your life, where you get to be king and ruler. So you could sit on a throne now, and I can give you a crown, and you can take over, and you can run the world. And Jesus, in essence, says, not going to do that one either. Jesus did not come just to show us a quick glimpse of God's power. Jesus comes into our world to model for us God's love for us. And that's a long-term commitment. Jesus has not come just to sit on a throne and bark orders like any other dictator. Jesus has come to show us that when we love each other, when we care for each other, when we are present for each other, and when we hold each other accountable, that pleases God far more than reigning like Caesar. Whenever we want a quick instant solution, whenever we want to test God, whenever we want to jump to the end of the movie because we want the ending and we don't want everything that happens between now and then, when we do that, somewhere out there in the universe, there is an accuser, an opponent of ours who smiles. But when we don't do that, when we recognize that we're in this world, in this life for the long haul, well beyond the instant, when we're here to journey with God rather than to tell God how to behave, then God smiles. I'll opt for that.